Do you know someone who's caring for an elderly family member or someone with a disability? Have you thought about a future life plan if you needed one in the case of an unexpected life event? A life event can happen at any time. A succession plan for life is more important than we realise. In this podcast, we hear from Danielle Robertson from DR Care Solutions, who provide care solutions for care recipients or guardians in the areas of aged care and disability care. Danielle has such a wealth of experience in working with people who have cared for someone who has already had a life event occur, and she has seen the real impact on their life. She shares these insights with us generously. Have a listen to better understand the world of carers and to consider your own future. Thank you for joining us, Danielle. It's so good to hear from you again today.
My pleasure. Good to hear from you guys too.
All right, so we've got National Carers Week coming up here in Australia in the middle of October. So it's a very good time for us to have a conversation about the recognition of the unpaid carers and the role of caring in all its different forms. Why do you think it's important that we recognise carers?
Look, I think there's so many unpaid carers. It is something the government is very aware of, that we're saving the government millions, probably billions of dollars of unpaid care hours that are being provided. It's very hard to quantify how many people are actually out there caring for others. You don't know if there might be someone working full time in your office, but they are actually having a aged care or a disabled relative living with them, and having to support them when they come home from work or before work each day. So it really is a huge number of people out there doing this that isn't really recognised. We recommend that people support those who are caring for others, that they provide resources, and it takes the pressure off knowing that there is help there if they need, if they're feeling the pressure, if they're not getting the sleep that they require, but there is help out there to get some either respite or some government funded assistance or fee for service. So just to be aware that there's other people out there doing this on a daily basis. And I think in the workplace, there's a lot of people that don't realise that there are people sitting next to them who are doing this sort of work out of hours.
Yeah, if it's not your typical caring situation where, we all know about looking after kids, that's probably the most recognised form of caring in an unpaid context, but there's so many different forms. What are the sorts of carers that you typically speak to and support?
Look, we speak to a huge number of people from age really 40 plus, and it might not be just for them or for them to think about planning ahead for themselves, but for their parents and even their grandparents. And this is, I'm having a number of conversations with people who are saying, look, I'm really exhausted. I'm actually helping my grandmother. She's developed early onset dementia. Mum's working full time. The whole family are pulling together to try and make sure that grandma doesn't need to go into an aged care facility, but it's exhausting. So, what we have to be aware of is it can affect anyone at any time. Ourselves, I'm 50-ish, 53 this year, and it could be a life event. And I'm not talking about developing dementia at 53, but there could be heart attacks, strokes, the life events that can occur very quickly and change the course of someone's life in an instant. And to be able to support those people, whether it be the person who's younger with a disability, or somebody who is aging, who hasn't really had the support of family previously and having to have that support. So, I speak to a broad range of people. I had recently a lady who was 60 who came to me. I'd helped her mother into an aged care facility a couple of years ago. And she said to me, I have no living relative in Australia. So what happens to me as I age? Now, at age 60, that's a very forward-thinking person to say, I really need to have a plan so that if I develop a cognitive decline or a physical impairment, then I'll need some support and help and someone to step in and act as an advocate for me should that occur. So we worked with her financial planner, we worked with her power of attorney and enduring guardian to make sure that everyone's in the loop, that should something happen to this lady, that the four of us can step in and help her manage that way through to what her wishes are to be carried out in the way that she wanted them. So, it's not just somebody who's aging or somebody who's caring for an aging person. So it's quite broad, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, at 40 plus, we don't typically think about, that age range. We typically straight away go to, okay, well, I'm somebody who is either in the situation of looking after my elderly family or unwell family member, and we typically think that that happens when we're older. But who knows? Like you say, life events occur, and they are always unexpected.
Yes.
So you support people, in planning ahead, planning for the unexpected. Is that right?
Correct. And also, if the unexpected does happen, that we know the plan, we step in and enact the plan. It's almost like a succession plan, but for your life. So that if the
Mm.
life event does intervene, we have the steps, the recommendations have already been prepared, and then we implement that. So that's the second part of the process. So when I work with families, sometimes it's just that first part, understanding their care needs now and what might happen in the future with recommendations. And then that can sit for years. And then when the life event does occur, we enact that. And that's actually implementation. And that might be actually working with families to get home care. It might be downsizing into a retirement village or a low level care facility, or into high level care, depending on where they're at in their life cycle.
Mhm.
So, I think that, we all need just to be aware of what can happen, and to have that plan, that life plan developed, so that you can pull it out at any time, and to communicate that to family members. I've had this life plan developed. This is where it's kept, just like your will and your powers of attorney and all that special documentation that you should be keeping in a safe place. You can add the life plan to that as well.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's great. I love it. Some people don't like to talk about these things, but it's so important that we do, isn't it?
Well, it's not very sexy.
No, that's not. It's not, but it is so, so critically important.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned earlier that exhaustion is one of the biggest things that you see and a common challenge that carers face. What else do you think?
Look, a lot of people, the most common questions I'm asked are what government help can I get? What other support services can I get? How much is it going to cost? So, it's actually working with them to see what we can get from the government. Unfortunately, there's not a huge amount we can do from the government. We can get you into the system if the person is over the age of 65. They go through the My Aged Care system. If they're under the age of 65, they go through the NDIS system. So if the person is over the age of 65, we can put them into My Aged Care and get them listed, but that doesn't mean that they're going to actually get support. It might be that they've been assessed by the government and they'll be on wait lists. And unfortunately, the government has one bucket of money, and it's only when somebody either moves up a level for home care packages or moves out of the Commonwealth Home Support Program that frees up that funding for another person. So at the moment, there's quite a big roadblock with huge waiting lists of people waiting for home care packages. So what you need to think about is planning ahead to make sure you put some money aside, so that if you do need some support and some respite, that you can actually pay fee for service to an organisation to have that rest and recuperation until your government funded help comes through, if at all.
Right, and it's such a complex system, which I assume is one of the common challenges that carers face. Working through the complexities of what am I entitled to, what other support can I find, and I suppose, how do I plan ahead for that?
And that's right. And they're working full time often, or part time, but they're still struggling. They're exhausted. They're trying to care for somebody through the night. That might be. It's almost like having a baby. If you've got an aged care person that needs to get up at night and go to the bathroom, it's like having a baby, and that you're up every 4 hours. So you know what that broken sleep's like. It does affect you. It wears you down. And if you're trying to do a full time professional job, it's exhausting, and you may not be doing the right job at work because you are exhausted. So that's where we're talking to a number of employers about providing that relief and support to those employees who have caring responsibilities, so that they can actually focus on the job at hand and make sure that and know that their loved one is being cared for at home during the day or at night or whatever, that under
Mm.
their sort of direction.
So if I'm a colleague and I know that my colleague sitting next to me is in this situation right now, what do you recommend? How can I support my colleague, my peer who is looking after someone in their life at the moment?
Look, I think be a really good ear and understanding and support, and ask them if they need a hand with research or for some resources, to introduce someone that could support them through this process. I mean, the time taken for a person who has no idea of the aged care or disability care system can take 5 or 6 weeks to go through the maze, figure out what they're entitled to, what they're not entitled to. By that time, they're absolutely exhausted. You can organise a firm like DR Care Solutions to come in, and within 24 to 48 hours, it's done and dusted. And that's yes, it costs money. Of course, it costs money to have that expertise to come in, a consultant to come in and support you. But I think if you're aware of someone next to you at work who is struggling, it's that knowing that you can support them and guide them through that process if you are able to, or speak to someone in HR, or just to make other people aware if that person is comfortable with the firm or the company being aware of their situation. A lot of people will take time off but not actually say it's for caring responsibilities. They might say it's sick leave, they might say it's annual leave, but and I see that this is a big issue. It's a bit of a stigma in a very similar to the mental health issues over time, where people would just take
Mm.
sick leave off. They would never say it's a mental health day. They would just take time off work to try and get through it. Very similar sort of thing for carers. They won't admit to the workplace that there is an issue, that they are trying to manage, virtually 2 full-time jobs. So it's just creating an awareness and knowing that there's support and resources to support that person.
Absolutely, and being open. And I think there probably is still somewhat of a stigma in talking about your responsibilities outside of work unless they're very commonly understood. And like you say, with the mental health issues that are becoming something that we are more comfortable talking about, this also needs to be an area of open conversation supported by colleagues, employers, everyone around us. Would you agree with that?
Yes, and taking time off without fear of retribution and that they're going to be demoted or that they're going to be looked at in a different light. I think it is just being open and open to discussions and saying, is the employer prepared to help me through this journey? It might be for a short-term period. It might be, somebody might be in hospital, so that person is going to the hospital every single day, or trying to manage this process. They're in hospital and the hospital said you've got to get them out by next Wednesday. That puts a lot of pressure on that individual. So just having the workplace that is comfortable with allowing that person to take a week off or a few days off just to source that the right care for their loved one is imperative. So it's just an understanding from the employer's perspective, I think.
Absolutely. Now, some of our employers are running with you, of course, with running internal awareness forums and sessions for anyone who's interested in this topic. And I think that's a really great example of what an employer can do to help build awareness on this important topic of all different scenarios when it comes to caring.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you've seen that employers are doing that are, that's a really great idea of how to support their people?
Look, I think the lunch and learns and the webinars are, educating and just bringing the thought process to a person's mind, or planting a seed. They might think, gosh, I'm only in my 40s. Why am I even, involved in this? Or why do I have to go to this? Or why do I have to listen to it? But it's more planting the seed and actually then saying, okay, well, I love my family. My family are very important to me. Maybe we should be having a discussion around what my parents or my grandparents want, if they're a younger person, or even if they're an older person who's heading towards retirement, thinking, gosh, I hadn't even thought about aged care and what I want for the future. All I've done is think about retirement. So it's more, the lunch and learns are great. It's webinars. It's actually talking to other people. I mean, I get a lot of inquiries just of people chatting with me and saying, well, what do I do? Where do I go? Is it too early to start this discussion? I mean, for example, I just had a call yesterday, a gent who's 75, his wife's 74. She's just been diagnosed with mild cognitive decline. He said, we don't need care or support, but we're thinking about what the next steps are going to be, and we need to plan ahead. So he's already thinking about that as my goodness, we're in retirement. What happens after this? If something happens to him, who is the primary carer, who's going to look after my wife? Does she have to go into an aged care facility when she's only got mild cognitive decline? That would be awful. Her wish is to remain at home. How can we make that happen? So it's just, once again, creating an awareness, starting the discussions. And I think by large corporates having these discussions, having lunch and learns, having seminars for their employees, conference, if they have a professional development day, to have someone like me come in and just to have those discussions and talk to them about having discussions with their loved ones and planning ahead.
Brilliant. Are there any, is there any other advice or final sort of tips that you would say are important for the listeners on this topic?
Look, as I said, I think that the key is planning ahead, having discussions early before a life event intervenes, and making sure your family, your close and loved ones, know what your wants and wishes are, and that you know what their wants and wishes are, so that, if God forbid they have a stroke and that they've lost capacity, so they can't actually speak and identify what they want, that the family already know. And they said, look, if mum ever had this, she said this is what she wanted. So, that's just, to me, the planning ahead is key. And get really good financial advice, get really good legal advice. I always go through with people to make sure their estate planning is in place, even if they're young, because power of attorney and enduring guardianship is absolutely imperative. That if you something happens to you, you lose capacity, has to go through the courts if you haven't already appointed your own power of attorney or enduring guardian. And that can delay the whole process of getting the right care. So by having those documents in place, it doesn't cost a lot of money to have them done. And also a current will. Apparently 50% of the Australian population don't have wills, which I just can't fathom why people don't want to do that, or to have powers of attorney and enduring guardians appointed. They don't have to enact it until that person loses capacity, but have all your ducks in a row. So once again, that planning ahead is vital.
Well, you've certainly got me thinking, Danielle. My mind is ticking over here thinking, oh, goodness, I'm one of the people that really needs to plan a bit more ahead. So if I'm sitting here thinking these things, I'm sure many others will. So really appreciate you sharing what you have, and, planning ahead is the key in all of this. So
it is indeed. Happy to help anytime.
Thanks so much, Danielle.